Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had a subscriber ask a question in a video that I did yesterday or the day before. I will link that video here down below in the annotations in the middle of the video so that you guys have a frame of reference for what I said. And I think, yes, a valid question, and it's one that I don't think people grasp. A lot of people aren't familiar with the fact that I've covered multiple times the fact that we have studies on young men showing enormous amounts of gains in muscle mass and lean body mass when they go on moderate doses of prescription anabolic steroids here in studies inside the United States. When they're given testosterone, these men gain muscle without lifting weights. They're actually forbidden. There have been studies where they've been forbidden from engaging in any sort of strenuous physical activity other than just light cardio. And what we found is that men, every time they double the dose, they gain about 50% more muscle than they gained on half the dose. So you see a point of diminishing returns. And in the studies that we've looked at, and I'll probably link at least another video here to discuss that because I have the studies linked down in there also, at least one study, we have found that young men in 20 weeks gain approximately 18 pounds of lean body mass. Now, a lot of people say, well, some of that could be water. Well, your pros don't come off the steroids, so they would keep all that water also. I've also shown you guys that most credible experts believe that the upper threshold limit of muscle that you can gain from lifting weights drug-free is going to be between 20 and 30 pounds of muscle over the course of your entire training career. And when I say that, let me clarify. I don't mean to say that someone who started in their teens won't gain more weight, because as a teenager, you will gain bone. You will gain muscle and bone weight both from growing taller, several inches taller by the time you turn 21 without lifting weights either. So that's your natural progression. That's not in response to weightlifting, or people who are really anorexic or really underweight can gain a little more, but generally 20 to 30 pounds. But what we saw in studies is that men who casually lift weights, so they lift a little bit of weights and they stop lifting weights, they've already made some gains, they stop lifting weights completely, they gain up to 18 pounds or an average of 18 pounds of muscle in 20 weeks on 600 milligrams of testosterone without touching weights. So when I say that most bodybuilding pros, their drug stacks and their genetics alone are enough to make them monsters irrespective of how they train, or if they just did jumping jacks and push-ups. Jumping jacks and push-ups every day is more exercise than these guys are allowed to do in studies. Now we could extrapolate this, because what sort of doses do most pro bodybuilders run? Between 2,000 and 5,000 milligrams a day. 2 to 5,000 milligrams versus the 600 milligrams in the studies. Well, we noted a point of diminished return. So every time we doubled the doses in the studies, men gained 50% more muscle. So if someone ran, say, 2,400 milligrams, which is 4 times 600, we could extrapolate that they would probably gain, as we can't prove this, but they would probably gain as much as 40 pounds of muscle off this if it was legitimately dosed. And if you start factoring in that all these pro bodybuilders stack that with things like growth hormone, IGF-1, and all these other things, generally both at the same time, plus insulin, other anabolic drugs, it isn't unreasonable to assume that they're going to be able to gain, particularly with their amazing genetics. These are guys who are genetically gifted towards gaining muscle mass. It wouldn't be unreasonable at all to assume that they could gain 40 or 50 pounds of muscle without even working out. When we start throwing push-ups and jumping jacks in, it could be even more. So you're talking about probably 40 to 50 pounds of additional muscle gain from not training if we look at just the research and the data that's out there. Well, if the average natural can't gain, or not even the average, the upper end is 30 pounds, they're going to have 10 to 20 to 30 pounds more muscle mass than the best natural bodybuilders in the world, even if they don't exercise. So when I say that these guys could literally be monsters, I'm not saying they'd be the same size they are now, but they would be a lot bigger than a natural bodybuilder just from using the drugs at the doses they use for years with their genetics. I'm not exaggerating. That is an extrapolation of the existing scientific data, because we know already that people who use enough steroids can get just as big as someone's natural limit, or right about, with fairly moderate doses of steroids in less time, because these guys didn't even train for a year and they put on 18 pounds. Some guys spend 3 years putting on their first 20 pounds. So they're gaining as much muscle in 5 months as a lot of naturals on really good programs are gaining in 3 years. So yes, these guys would be monstrous. they would be really, really big. It's not me being a dick saying that. It's not me taking credit away from anything. It's simply stating the scientific facts and extrapolating from them and saying, yeah, they probably would be much bigger than any natural, even if they didn't work out. Now, what becomes interesting is that people say, well, you're taking away from their hard work. Well, we don't know how much hard work actually affects muscle size once you get on enormous doses of drugs. We don't have any studies to actually see if workout intensity or workout volume or workload actually matter that much. We can speculate it might, but if it is a massive critical factor, then why do you have guys who train really, really lazy who are almost as big and almost beat the guys who train really, really hard? Take Flex Wheeler, for example. He was known for being really lazy. I saw some of his workout videos back from the 90s. Most of you guys who watch YouTube Fitness actually train harder than Flex Wheeler did in those videos when he was training for the Mr. Olympia and placing third place and stuff. Put that in perspective. He trained like most of you guys, if you saw him train, would think he trained like a little pussy. That's how you would describe it. He just did a bunch of fluff and pump on cables and didn't even take anything to failure and just did cable work and isolation work and walked out of the gym. He used enormous amounts of drugs. He was monstrous and he almost won the Mr. Olympia. He's been beat by guys like Ronnie and Dorian who trained so hard that they literally destroyed their bodies and ripped their bodies apart. But he wasn't destroyed by a massive margin, so it really begs the question of how much does hard work matter when you get on really large doses of drugs? We really don't know. We absolutely do not know how big of a factor it is, but we know that it isn't as big of a factor as the actual drugs are because we have guys in the IFBB who've placed well in the Mr. Olympia who train extremely lazy with no effort who have been monstrous due to their drugs. They usually are losing to the guys who train harder, but they're still placing in the top 5. So again, why is it unreasonable to make a statement like that? These guys would be monstrous due to the drugs alone. So it kind of also begs the question of why do people care how they train, which was the point I made in that video. If we know that they would be massive no matter how they trained or even if they probably didn't train, again, due to genetically elite genetics for their structure and muscle mass and taking all the drugs, does it really matter? Is it really of interest to us? Why should we care? They're a product of drugs and genetics. And so when people say that you have to work hard to make the steroids work for these people, that doesn't actually seem to be the case just when you observe anecdotally guys like Flex Wheeler. And it doesn't seem to be the case when you observe it in a laboratory when we have guys putting on 18 pounds of lean mass without touching a weight at all. So it really is fair to make such a statement. It's not unreasonable. It's not being jealous. It's not being a hater. It's just looking at all the available information. And people on the other side who argue otherwise, do you have any evidence to counter the point? Because I've got the evidence there. It's readily available. So if you say that these guys require massive amounts of hard work, I say prove it. Where's the evidence? Where's the proof? My point is pretty well proven and pretty easy to show. Still something to the contrary. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. If you enjoyed this video, found it informative, or you enjoy my work for the most part, I would greatly appreciate it if you would click like down below. Each and every like is appreciated, so thank you so much if you do that. So I hope this has been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.